In a world teetering on the edge of chaos, where every corner seemed to pulse with the cries of despair, stood our protagonist, a figure revered like a god by countless worshippers. His presence commanded awe, not through pomp or glory, but through a connection to something far greater. Beside him, a beast of unimaginable size loomed, its shadow casting the land into darkness, blotting out the sun itself. Yet, despite its monstrous form, there was a gentle spirit within, a bond so profound that it felt as though the beast and the man were one and the same. And indeed they were. The beast was him, and he was the beast, two forms of the same existence, united in purpose. When the world was overrun by invading monsters, chaos devouring all in its path, it was he, man and beast together, who rose to save it. With every step, the earth trembled. With every roar, the heavens shook. And with every battle, hope was rekindled. So, our story is start like this. On June 2nd, 2224, the city of Zhuining was plunged into chaos. A colossal snake, over 100 meters long, had attacked the city. News reports described the snake as an enigma, a creature whose species remained unidentified. To make matters stranger, several citizens captured footage of a massive whale-like beast appearing in the sky north of the city, sending waves of shock and commotion through the populace. In a quiet apartment, a figure lay crumpled on the floor. Blood seeped from his wrists, staining the ground beneath him. Chen Chu, a sophomore at the University of Ning, stared at his lifeless body from a detached perspective. Confusion overtook him. Was that truly him? How could he be seeing this? His shock only deepened when he turned toward the mirror. His reflection wasn't human. It was that of an iguana. Panic set in as Chen Chu struggled to process the impossible. Was he dreaming, hallucinating, or somehow transformed into this reptile? He thought back to recent events, trying to make sense of the situation. Chen Chu was someone who valued his independence. He had chosen to live off campus rather than stay in the dormitories, enjoying the freedom that came with his rented apartment. His love for cold-blooded creatures was well known among his friends. He found their vibrant scales and exotic features endlessly fascinating. It was during a routine visit to a local pet store that he first laid eyes on a peculiar sea iguana, a rare amphibious creature. Chen Chu couldn't resist its unique charm and decided to bring it home. Sea iguanas were typically gentle, but this one was different. The moment it was freed from its cage, it lunged forward, biting Chen Chu's wrist. Startled, Chen Chu swung his phone instinctively, striking the iguana on the head. The creature released its grip, but the phone ricocheted off a wall and slammed into Chen Chu's temple. Darkness enveloped him. When he regained consciousness, his vision was blurry. The iguana sat nearby, watching him with unblinking eyes. As he tried to move his hand, he noticed something peculiar. The iguana mirrored his movements. Testing the phenomenon further, he realized he could control the iguana as if it were an extension of himself. It was then that a system interface materialized before him, floating like a hologram. The display revealed a wealth of information about himself and the iguana. Chen Chu's stats were listed: Level 0, Constitution 8.5, and Spirit 12. His talent, mind control, was highlighted, along with several skills: extremities boxing, stepping cloud jump, and springing leg. The iguana, labeled as his clone, showed 0 evolution levels, but 5 evolution points. Chen Chu marveled at the system's existence. Is this my Goldfinger? He wondered aloud, borrowing the term from gaming culture to describe a cheat system. Excitement bubbled within him as he considered the possibilities. Could he stream the intelligent iguana to gain fame, or use it to gather valuable resources like abalone and sea cucumbers for profit? However, the rumbling of the iguana's stomach, and his own, quickly grounded him in reality. Guess we're both hungry, he muttered. Deciding the iguana was omnivorous, he prepared a meal of chopped vegetables and steak. To his relief, the iguana devoured the meat eagerly. Moments later, a notification from the system indicated that the clone had gained 5 evolution points, and Chen Chu's constitution had increased by 0.5%. Staring at his hand, he felt stronger, albeit slightly. He gazed at the system interface and thought of his father. His father's words echoed in his mind, as sharp and unyielding as the first strike of a blade. Practicing forms without understanding their foundations is meaningless. Chen could still remember his father demonstrating the movements, his stance immovable as a mountain, his strikes swift as a storm. Force begins in the legs, his father had explained, planting his foot like he could crush the earth beneath him, travels through the abdomen, and takes shape in the fingers. A punch is nothing without the ground to anchor it. As a boy, Chen had begged for rest, legs trembling after hours standing atop wooden piles. Sweat dripped down his face, his chest heaving as he pleaded, "Just 5 minutes, father, please." But his father's glare was merciless. "Cowards rest when the battle isn't over," he growled, pointing at the piles. "Now get back up, or the only thing you'll master is failure." Defiance flared in Chen's chest, burning brighter than exhaustion. He screamed, "I'm not a coward," and forced his body to move, every muscle screaming in protest. His father barked for him to run faster, harder, like the hounds of hell nipped at his heels. Eventually, his strength gave out. A stone caught his foot, and he crashed to the ground with a gasp. Lying there, chest heaving and pride shattered, he waited for his father to help him up. But the only thing that came was his father's voice, cold as winter steel. "In this world, no one will help you up. You rise, or you don't. Choose now." Years later, his father handed him a box filled with their savings. "Take this and go," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Out there, you'll find the strength I couldn't give you. Train. Never stop. When you're strong enough, you'll see the other side of the world." Chen's heart clenched. "But how will I find you again?" His father's expression softened for only a moment, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "When you're a grandmaster, you'll understand. Until then." He turned and walked away, the door closing with a finality that echoed louder than any farewell. A decade had passed in what felt like the blink of an eye since Chen Chu's father had walked out of the house after those fateful words. "Once you become a grandmaster, I might no longer be around." The memory still lingered, as vivid as the day it happened. Chen often replayed the scene in his mind, wondering if his father truly meant those words, or if they were merely a lesson in resilience. The iguana's loud, contented burp snapped Chen back to the present. Surprised by how quickly it had devoured the meal, Chen tilted his head, noticing something peculiar. The iguana seemed longer, its body more robust. Turning to the system interface, his suspicions were confirmed. Evolution points. 15/200ths. Chen couldn't help but smirk at the progress. He caught sight of himself in a mirror nearby. Lifting his shirt, he examined his torso. The faint outline of abs, a sight he hadn't seen before, greeted him. Realizing that the iguana's evolution was also affecting his own body, Chen felt a surge of excitement. His mind raced with possibilities. Could this be the path to fulfilling his childhood dream? Could the iguana one day become a towering behemoth while he transformed into a true martial arts grandmaster? The thought alone sent a thrill through him. Later that day, Chen found himself at the bustling marketplace. The cashier cheerfully informed him, "That's 10 pounds of boneless prime beef and 20 pounds of lean pork, all packed and ready." "QR code," Chen replied, scanning his phone at the payment device. Once the transaction was complete, he loaded the groceries into his car, satisfied that this would suffice for the next round of meals. Back at home, he arranged the final dish on the table, presenting it to the iguana with a sense of accomplishment. Watching it devour the feast with gusto, Chen leaned back, amused by the unique connection they shared. Through the bond, he experienced the iguana's taste sensations. He learned that pork wasn't as appealing as beef and made a mental note to add more cumin to the seasoning next time. The iguana, now full, waddled over to the window and lay down to bask in the sunlight, its massive body casting a shadow across the room. Chen turned his focus to his training. In the martial arts room, Chen positioned himself in front of the punching bag. Drawing in a deep breath, he launched a punch with all his strength. The system interface responded immediately. Extremities boxing experience, +5. Chen grinned, impressed by the results. His progress was tangible, and every session made him feel stronger. Over the next 2 days, he trained relentlessly, each session more intense than the last. Wiping sweat from his brow after hours of practice, Chen reflected on his rapid growth. With a determined glint in his eyes, he drew his leg back and delivered a devastating kick to the punching bag, snapping its chain. The bag crashed to the floor with a thud. Checking the system, Chen saw his stats. Constitution, 28. Spirit, 16. External aura, 10. Chi perception, 10. The iguana's evolution points had risen as well, now sitting tantalizingly close to the next threshold, 195 200ths. Chen recognized this milestone. By traditional martial arts standards, he had reached the peak of the Ming realm. He recalled his father explaining the martial arts hierarchy: Ming realm, dark realm, and transformation realm. At the pinnacle of the Ming realm, one could take on 10 opponents with ease. The dark realm, reserved for first-rate experts, marked the strength to face 100 foes and was often associated with legendary families. The elusive transformation realm represented a level of mastery so profound that it was said to grant an unbreakable body and the ability to defeat 1,000 enemies, a feat described only in ancient texts. Chen smiled wistfully at the memory of asking his father about his own level. His father had admitted to briefly entering the dark realm, but before he could elaborate, young Chen had excitedly interrupted. "That's amazing. Are you from a legendary family?" he had blurted out. His father's response had been less than amused. "I'm from Luan," he had snapped, ending the conversation abruptly. That evening, Chen stepped out of the martial arts room, his body still buzzing with energy. His breath caught as he saw the iguana. It had grown significantly. Its scales gleamed under the faint light, and its powerful limbs hinted at untapped strength. "Just one more meal," Chen murmured with a smile, "and you'll evolve. Don't disappoint me." The iguana tilted its head, as if understanding his words. Chen prepared another feast, setting the dishes before the creature. As it ate, Chen tasted the food through their bond, savoring the shared experience. Watching the evolution points creep upward, 199, he could barely contain his anticipation. The air in the room seemed charged with energy. "Almost there," Chen whispered, his fists clenching in excitement. "The next step is ours." The iguana reached 200 evolution points, triggering a dramatic announcement from the system. Evolution requirements met, initiating evolution process. What followed was chaos. A surge of searing pain coursed through both Chen and the iguana, their shared connection amplifying the agony. Sharp spikes erupted from the iguana's back, its thrashing body tearing through furniture, walls, and the floor as it struggled with the transformation. Chen screamed alongside his clone, the pain so intense that he momentarily lost his grip on reality. When the storm subsided, Chen found himself sprawled on the floor, his body drenched in sweat and trembling. He turned his head toward the iguana, now a towering presence in the room. Its once sleek form was larger, more muscular, and covered in sharp, intimidating spines. The creature's eyes gleamed with intelligence and primal energy, and its tail, now thicker and stronger, whipped back and forth, testing its newfound power. Chen stumbled to his feet, marveling at the evolved iguana. To test its strength, he commanded it to strike the punching bag in the corner of the room. With a single swipe of its tail, the iguana demolished the bag, sending fragments flying across the space. Chen's curiosity turned inward. He opened his status window, and his jaw dropped at the results. Constitution, doubled. Spirit, doubled. External aura, doubled. Chi perception, doubled. The implications of this were exhilarating. Each time the clone evolved, Chen's physical attributes multiplied. Though uncertain if this exponential growth would continue, the potential was overwhelming. If this keeps up, Chen thought, I might not just reach the peak of martial arts, I could surpass it entirely. Testing his newfound power, Chen released his aura. A visible ripple of energy filled the room, the sheer pressure of it startling even himself. By traditional martial arts standards, he had just stepped into the dark realm, a level few ever attained. The ability to project external energy was a hallmark of true martial arts mastery, a skill that separated the experts from the legends. Turning his gaze to the iguana, he noticed something extraordinary. The creature had also released its own aura. The room crackled with energy as their auras intertwined, a shared power that seemed to acknowledge their unique bond. The iguana's gaze met his, as if to say, "We're in this together." Chen's reverie was interrupted by a loud knock at the door. The angry voice of his neighbor echoed from the hallway. "What the hell is going on in there? Is this a construction site?" Chen opened the door to find a massive man pounding on it, his face red with frustration. But as the man caught sight of Chen's imposing aura, his confidence wavered. The rage in his voice faltered, replaced by a nervous stammer. I mean, it's just been so loud lately. I thought maybe you were renovating. Chen bowed slightly, apologizing for the disturbance. I've been training. I didn't realize the noise was so disruptive. The man peeked into the apartment, his eyes widening at the destruction within. Broken furniture, shattered walls, and the demolished punching bag painted a scene of utter chaos. His earlier bravado evaporated. Just try to keep it down, he stammered, stepping back into the hallway. As the man entered the elevator, Chen couldn't help but smirk. The iguana waddled over to the door, poked its enormous head out, and stuck its tongue out mockingly. Chen turned back to the iguana, its size now a glaring issue. You've outgrown this place, he said, realizing that keeping the creature indoors was no longer feasible. It was time to release the iguana into the ocean, where it could thrive and continue its evolution. The next morning, Chen drove to the shoreline, the iguana secured in the back of his car. The sea breeze greeted him as he stepped out, and he could feel the anticipation of what was to come. Entering the iguana's body through their shared connection, Chen dove into the water, leaving his human form on the shore. Underwater, Chen activated his energy sense. His current range extended to a radius of 10 meters, allowing him to scan the murky depths with surprising clarity. It wasn't long before he spotted a peculiar sight, a massive, five-eyed fish swimming lazily near the seabed. Its grotesque appearance startled him, but curiosity quickly turned to resolve. You'll be my first target, he thought. Chen directed the iguana's body toward the fish, but the creature was surprisingly agile, dodging his initial lunge. Instead, Chen crashed into a large stone, the impact splitting it cleanly in half. The sheer force stunned him, and the fish. Seizing the moment, Chen launched another attack, this time sinking his teeth into the fish's flank. The taste was unexpectedly rich, and as he devoured the creature, a system notification appeared. Mutated fish consumed. Clone evolution points +10. Physique +1. Swimming deeper into the ocean, Chen began piecing together a theory. The post-evolution change had altered how the iguana absorbed energy. Ordinary food now yielded a mere 1 evolution point per meal. But the mutated fish were far more efficient, providing substantial gains. Chen couldn't ignore the implications. Strange creatures appearing in the ocean and reports of unexplained phenomena hinted at a world far from its former peace. Something extraordinary and dangerous was unfolding. If these mutated fish are just the beginning, Chen mused, what else might be lurking out there? With the iguana hunting and devouring a variety of these strange sea creatures, the system eventually chimed in. Daily evolution point cap reached, 100/100ths. Accepting the limitation, Chen decided it was time to explore further. Through the iguana's eyes, the underwater world was a vibrant mosaic, a stark contrast to the pitch-black abyss perceived by human senses. The iguana's amphibious nature allowed it to stay submerged for extended periods, but its reliance on lungs necessitated occasional trips to the surface. Spotting a large rock with a hollowed-out air pocket inside, Chen guided the creature there. The pocket offered a perfect sanctuary, a safe hidden spot to rest and replenish. Returning to his human body, Chen climbed back into his car. As he drove away from the shore, his attention was drawn to a house with a dimly lit porch and an unfamiliar car parked out front. Who lives all the way out here, he wondered. His thoughts were interrupted by a chilling scream for help from inside the house. Chen's grip on the steering wheel tightened, but he forced himself to keep driving. Not yet, he told himself. I'm not ready for this. I need to master my skills first. Inside the house, chaos was brewing. A bald man turned to one of his companions. Has the car outside left? Yeah, it's gone, the other replied confidently, earning a nod of approval. Meanwhile, a third man was struggling to restrain a woman tied to a chair. Her gag had slipped off, and her muffled cries filled the room. The bald man's expression darkened. He stomped over, kicking the third man in the ribs. Idiot! How could you let this happen? The man protested, clutching his side. It's not my fault. It was too dark when we brought her in. Ignoring the excuse, the bald man crouched near the woman. He clamped a rough hand over her mouth, leaning in close. Make another sound, he hissed, and you'll regret it. Resist, and we'll have some fun before this is over. Chen's conscience got the better of him. He turned the car around, parking at a distance to avoid detection. Closing his eyes, he activated his energy sense. The house's interior came alive in his mind. 3 men inside, 2 seated at a table drinking, another eating while scrolling through his phone. The tied-up woman's energy signature was faint but detectable. This isn't random, Chen concluded. It's either a kidnapping or trafficking ring. Carefully, Chen approached the house. With a burst of energy, he kicked the door open, sending it flying off its hinges. The men inside were caught off guard, their drinks spilling as they scrambled to react. Chen moved like a whirlwind. His first strike sent the third man crashing into the wall, clutching his stomach in agony. The bald man lunged at him with a knife, but Chen's elbow connected with his chest, the force dropping him to the ground with a guttural scream. The second man caught the bald man before he collapsed completely. The second man stood, eyeing Chen with a mix of amusement and irritation. "You're bold," he said, his voice calm yet laced with menace. "What's your name, and what style do you practice?" Chen straightened, his aura radiating authority. "Chen Chu, disciple of Luotuan 8 Extremities Boxing." The man smirked. "Ning Fu, Yu Wang Fist." He cracked his knuckles. "Let's see if you live up to your reputation." Ning Fu launched a swift strike, his fist cutting through the air like a blade. Chen intercepted it, locking his grip on Ning Fu's wrist and pulling him forward. He aimed a kick at Ning Fu's head, but Ning Fu caught his leg, countering with a punch that landed squarely on Chen's jaw. The impact sent Chen reeling backward, but he stomped hard on the ground, regaining his balance instantly. Ning Fu's eyes widened. "Not bad." Chen didn't respond. Instead, he surged forward with an Iron Mountain slam, driving his shoulder into Ning Fu's chest and sending him flying. The force of the technique cracked the floorboards where Ning Fu landed. Yu coughed, blood flecking his lips, yet his grin stretched wide, feral and unyielding. "Now this," he rasped, pushing himself to his feet, "is getting interesting." His body trembled, but his eyes burned with savage delight. Who would have thought I'd run into a true disciple of Luotuan 8 Extremities Boxing after coming down from the mountain? Chen wiped a trickle of sweat from his brow, his breathing steady despite the storm raging in his muscles. "The Iron Mountain Slam," he said coolly, "is indeed worthy of its reputation." "But," Yu's expression hardened. "But what?" Chen's voice was measured, his gaze sharp as steel. "It's disappointing. A practitioner of Yu Wang Fist, a style with such history, reduced to walking a crooked path. What a waste." Yu's grin faltered, his pride stung by the accusation. His laugh was bitter and sharp, like broken glass. "High and mighty, aren't you?" he sneered. "You've barely left the mountain. Out here in the real world, you either claw your way to the top or get trampled. No room for your self-righteous ideals." His words hung in the air like a challenge. With a guttural roar, Yu lunged, his fingers stiffened into deadly spears aimed directly at Chen's eyes. Time slowed as Chen moved. With a single fluid motion, he shifted his weight, sidestepping the attack. His leg whipped out, striking with the force of a battering ram. The impact was thunderous, sending Yu spinning through the air before he crashed face-first into the ground with a sickening thud. Yu lay still, the fight drained from his body. Chen stood over him, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow. His hand trembled as he clenched it into a fist, the adrenaline of the battle giving way to exhaustion. He stared at Yu's fallen form, his thoughts swirling. This isn't just training anymore. The real world doesn't hold back, and neither can I. He flexed his hand again, wincing at the tremor in his fingers. Control. Without it, I'm no protector. I'm just a danger to everyone I swore to defend. A soft, broken voice pulled him from his thoughts. Turning, Chen saw the hostage, a young woman, her face streaked with tears. She tried to call out, but her voice cracked with fear. Chen rushed to her side, quickly untying the ropes that bound her. The moment she was free, she flung herself at him, clinging tightly as sobs racked her body. "It's over," Chen whispered, his voice low and steady. "You're safe now." She pulled back, her tear-filled eyes locking onto his. "Thank you," she choked out. "Thank you so much." Chen handed her his phone. "Call the police," he instructed. "But once they arrive, I need you to promise me something." The woman hesitated, then nodded. What is it? Don't tell them about me. Say you don't know who saved you. Her brows knit in confusion, but she nodded again. I promise. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Chen slipped out into the shadows, leaving the woman alone to face the authorities. The police stormed the house, weapons drawn and shields raised. Freeze! The lead officer barked, scanning the room. What they found left them speechless. 3 men lay incapacitated, their bodies crumpled like rag dolls, while the hostage sat trembling in the corner. "Chief, you need to see this," one officer said, leading him to the front door. The massive wooden frame was shattered, the hinges ripped from their sockets. Clear footprints were imprinted on the splintered surface. Guanqing, an officer from the security agency, approached with a report. "We've analyzed the damage to the door," she said crisply. "Based on the depth of the prints and the displacement of the door, whoever did this applied a force of at least 1,000 kilograms. The door was sent flying 3 meters. The deputy chief flipped through the photos, his brows furrowed. What kind of person could do this? The deputy chief grimly reviewed the aftermath of the incident. 2 of the men had died instantly, their bodies battered beyond recognition. The third, while still breathing, had been reduced to a vegetative state, his mind shattered by a severe concussion. Guanqing handed him the report. Ling Rongya, the hostage, claims the rescuer wore a mask. She couldn't see his face. The deputy chief scowled. A mask, convenient. But this kind of force, this doesn't make sense. Even the king of boxing tops out at 800 kilograms in training. In a real fight? No one comes close to this. Guan nodded, her voice low. This goes beyond human capability. Especially with all the strange events cropping up lately. A sudden clap of thunder rolled through the station, rattling the windows. The deputy chief glanced at the storm brewing outside, muttering under his breath, "A storm's coming, all right. Bigger than we think." The next night, the sea roared beneath a cliff where Chen stood, his figure silhouetted against the moonlit waves. Below him, 3 men huddled near the rocky shore, their conversation carried on the salty breeze. "Boss," the first man grumbled, "we just made some cash, and you've already blown $1 million on a woman from Bald Tiger. Isn't that a little wasteful?" The second man chimed in. "Yeah, it took us ages to recover that sunken ship. We only cleared, what, 2 million? Their leader, a burly man with a scar cutting across his cheek, sneered. Short-sighted fools. Do you even know who she is? Once we've got her, money won't be an issue anymore." At this, the 2 men perked up, eyes gleaming with greed. "Are you serious, boss?" one asked eagerly. The scarred man turned to the bespectacled Four Eyes. "You've got everything ready, right?" Four Eyes nodded quickly. "Yes, boss. I set up a shipping company, rented a high-end office building, and even hired the prettiest faces for secretarial and front desk roles. All up to your standards." The boss grinned, his teeth gleaming like a predator's. "Good. Once we get rolling, the profits will flow like water." He paused, chest swelling with pride. "And don't forget, I can breathe underwater. As long as we know where the sunken ships are, we'll haul up treasures and live like kings." The men laughed, their voices carrying into the night. "We'll never go hungry with you leading us, boss." The sound of rustling bushes cut their revelry short. The boss spun around, his voice a bark of panic. "Who's there? Show yourself." Chen emerged from the shadows, his steps slow and deliberate. "You lot have a knack for standing out," he remarked, his tone dripping with disdain, even among perverts. The boss snarled, drawing a long knife from his belt. "You've got guts showing up here, kid, but guts won't keep you alive. People like you don't last long." With a roar, the boss charged, the knife gleaming under the moonlight. Chen didn't flinch. Instead, he raised a foot and stomped down with such force that the ground beneath them cracked and split. The tremor threw the boss off balance, and he stumbled, his momentum broken. Chen seized the opportunity, moving like a blur. In a single fluid motion, he slapped the knife from the boss's hand, the blade skittering uselessly across the rocks. Before the man could react, Chen's leg lashed out, a powerful kick sending him hurtling into a nearby tree with a bone-rattling crack. "That's impossible," the bald man stammered. "The boss's strength and speed, he's unbeatable with his powers. He can take on a dozen men and still win." Four Eyes wasn't convinced. "Run!" he shouted, turning to flee. But Chen was faster. In an instant he appeared behind them, his movements ghost-like. With 2 precise strikes, both men crumpled to the ground, unconscious before they hit the dirt. The boss groaned, struggling to push himself up. What do you want from Mem? Chen crouched beside him, his voice calm and commanding. Look at me. The boss's eyes locked onto Chen's, and his expression slackened as a strange stillness settled over him. Under the influence of Chen's mind control, his voice came out monotone, his resistance stripped away. My name is Zhang Changzhou, he droned. I'm a ship owner and a smuggler. I gained the ability to breathe underwater a month ago. Since then, I've been raiding sunken ships for treasures. I sell them to wealthy clients. Satisfied with the results of his mind control, Chen released his grip on Zhang's mind, watching as the man blinked back into awareness. Zhang winced, cradling his hand, and groaned. What happened to my hand? Chen's voice was calm, almost indifferent. You must have broken it accidentally during the fight. Zhang frowned, his confusion melting into reluctant agreement. Yeah, that must be it. He paused, then addressed Chen with unexpected deference. What now, B-boss? Chen raised an eyebrow, intrigued. The lingering effects of his mind control not only compelled obedience, but seemed to alter judgment itself. Filing this discovery away for future use, Chen commanded, Rest on your boat. I'll handle your men and join you soon. Zhang obeyed immediately, limping off toward the shoreline. Chen turned to the 2 unconscious men. Testing his mind control on them proved even easier, their resistance almost non-existent. As they awoke, he planted commands with practiced precision, ensuring their loyalty. Later that night, Chen arrived at the Yuan, a weathered but sturdy fishing vessel anchored near the docks. Zhang greeted him at the gangplank, his previous bravado replaced by an almost reverent demeanor. A crew member approached nervously, glancing between Zhang and Chen. Boss, who's this? Zhang waved him off with a dismissive gesture. He's the new boss. Treat him with respect. The crewman's eyes widened. Yes, sir, he stammered, bowing slightly before retreating. Zhang turned to Chen. Shall we get started on the transfer paperwork? Within minutes, a hastily drafted contract was presented to Chen. With a flick of his pen, he became the official owner of the Yuan. Chen glanced at the crew, issuing his first command. Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. We're setting new rules. Turning back to Zhang, he added, You're coming with me to the hospital. That hand needs treatment. Zhang nodded eagerly, ready to follow Chen anywhere. The next day, Chen's mind reached across the connection to his iguana, now hunting in the ocean depths. Through its eyes, he marveled at the boundless resources of the sea, a treasure trove for evolution. Returning to his body, Chen resumed his training. Each punch landed with precision on the heavy bag, the impact reverberating through the room. The battles he'd endured had tempered his strength, honing his control. I can't rely on the iguana alone, he reminded himself. If I'm to survive what's coming, I need to be stronger. Beneath the waves, the iguana ventured into a mountain cave, consuming and absorbing energy-rich marine creatures. The system notified Chen that its evolution points had increased by 6%. By morning, it had grown an additional 20 centimeters. Standing outside the newly acquired building, Chen contemplated the progress. The ship transfer was complete, his influence expanding. With over 90 evolution points accumulated, he realized the iguana was nearing a breakthrough. He would soon send it deeper into the ocean, where the unknown awaited. Meanwhile, aboard the Yuan, the bald crewman complained to Four Eyes. The fish are gone. Nets are coming up empty. You think it's sharks? Four Eyes shrugged. Maybe. Sharks move in schools sometimes. Even killer whales avoid them. Beneath the surface, chaos unfolded. A pod of sharks surrounded an orca, their movements predatory. But amidst the fray, a shadow approached, the iguana. One of the sharks turned, its beady eyes locking onto the reptile. It lunged, jaws gaping wide. The iguana didn't flinch. Instead, it allowed itself to be swallowed whole. Inside the shark's gullet, the iguana's claws tore through flesh with surgical precision. With a final, brutal strike, it burst from the shark's body victorious. The surrounding predators scattered in terror, unwilling to challenge the creature that had turned one of their own into prey. Chen's system buzzed. +10 evolution points. He tasted the shark's flesh through the connection, the tender meat a satisfying reward. Moments later, a new notification appeared. Evolution requirements met. Would you like to proceed? Chen's pulse quickened as he controlled the iguana to return to its mountain cave. This was it, a chance to push the limits of his power. Let's begin, he murmured, anticipation lighting his eyes. As the evolution commenced, sharp pain coursed through the iguana's body, and Chen felt the same agony in his original body. Kneeling on the floor, he gritted his teeth and thought, if evolution feels this bad, I don't want to know what a system glitch feels like. The system displayed his updated status, level 1, with a constitution of 130, spirit of 38, external aura of 280, and QI perception of 280. Still catching his breath, Chen muttered, at least the pain comes with perks. I'd hate to suffer for nothing. The iguana had evolved into a scale-armored spiny lizard, a newly born ferocious beast with the potential to become a ferocious beast lord and a newly acquired water affinity. After several minutes, the evolution concluded, leaving Chen exhausted but thrilled. His constitution was now 13 times that of a normal person, an achievement he felt deserved a standing ovation, even if it was from himself. However, he noticed his constitution hadn't doubled as it had during the previous evolution. Reflecting on this, he reasoned that the earlier doubling might have been due to his low base stats at the time. So the system only doubles stats when they're embarrassingly low? That's humbling, he said with a wry smile. Entering the iguana's body, Chen marveled at the transformation. The iguana had grown significantly larger, with bone density several times greater than before, and now weighing 4 to 5 tons. Its strength had doubled, and its steel-like claws were far more explosive. Testing its abilities, he found that it could swim at speeds of up to 70 kilometers per hour, faster than a large ship. I bet the Titanic wishes it had one of these, he joked. Additionally, it moved through the water with minimal noise and resistance, which Chen attributed to the newly acquired water affinity. After assessing the iguana's capabilities, he called his secretary to inquire if anyone had been searching for treasures. The secretary reported no recent inquiries, but mentioned that their team had identified potential locations for sunken ships. However, without Zhang, who can breathe underwater, exploring these sites might be challenging, she added. Chen smirked. I've got an iguana that can swim faster than a speedboat and hold its breath longer than a free diver. We'll manage. He considered the shallow water routes used by Z country in the past, along with the major commercial waterways of H country and R&R country noten that most had been explored. But the deep sea? That was a treasure trove waiting to be claimed. Controlling the iguana, he directed it to swim southeast, heading 25 kilometers offshore into the Yellow Sea. He discovered that after the evolution, the iguana could now breathe at greater depths, and its enhanced perception allowed it to sense its surroundings up to 20 kilometers. Water affinity and 20-kilometer perception? This thing might as well apply for a job with the Coast Guard, he quipped. After exploring the sea, Chen returned to his original body, stretching as he reflected on the purpose of raising a clone, to enjoy life more fully. Checking his phone, he saw that it was nearly 11 o'clock. Deciding to reward himself for the day's progress, he got some food as a treat. However, as he looked at the bill, his jaw nearly dropped. Over 3,000 yuan for one meal? Either I just ate gold, or someone's been adding zeros. Despite the cost, he consoled himself. At least now I know what it's like to eat like a king, one who needs to take out a loan to cover his lunch. After finishing his meal, he walked along the pedestrian street with a smile, reflecting on how enjoyable the moment was. But his mood shifted when he noticed 2 men approaching a woman leaning against a streetlight. Without hesitation, he shouted, "Hey, what are you looking at?" One of the men brandished a knife, glaring at him. "What did you just say?" The second man joined in, snarling, "Leave now and we'll pretend we didn't see you." In response, he unleashed his aura, a force so potent it exuded the presence of a beast, causing the men to falter in fear. The second man, wide-eyed, stammered, "It feels like we're being stared down by a wild animal." The first man, less poetic but equally terrified, yelled, "Forget that. Let's get out of here." Before they could leave, the woman, still leaning unsteadily against the streetlight, laughed mockingly. "What's this? Afraid of one guy? Are you even real men?" She teased, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Her taunts struck their egos like a slap. Determined not to be humiliated by a drunken woman, the first man charged at him. "He's just one guy," he shouted to the second man. The second man nodded, emboldened. "Yeah, let's take him down together and teach him a lesson." The first man lunged with his knife, while the second clenched his fists, ready to strike. He, however, remained calm, raising his foot at the last moment. As the first man closed in, he delivered a single powerful kick that sent him flying, dragging the second man along like a flailing rag doll. Watching them crash to the ground, he mused silently. That was less than 10% of my strength. If I went all out, they'd be cleaning bits of him off the pavement. Deciding to show mercy, he let them go. Their actions had been reckless, but they didn't deserve death. He watched as they scrambled to their feet, terror written all over their faces, shouting, "He's a demon straight out of hell," as they fled. The woman, still staggeringly drunk, approached him, her laughter echoing in the quiet street. "You're so strong," she slurred, wobbling as she got closer. He raised an eyebrow, wondering if she was crazy or just extremely drunk. Then, without warning, she wrapped her arms around him, giggling as she started tugging at her crop top. "Let's go somewhere fun," she cooed. Ignoring her advances, he sighed and dialed the police. "Hello, yes. There's a very intoxicated woman outside the Shungtang bar. She seems vulnerable and needs assistance." The woman pouted at him with a slurred, sweet voice. "Why'd you call the cops? You don't think I'm pretty? Don't you want to take me home?" Within minutes, the police arrived. As they helped her into their car, she pouted at him one last time. "You're no fun," she declared before turning to the officers. To the police, he explained, "I found her in this condition and thought it best to call. She was also approached by 2 men earlier, but I dealt with them." The officers nodded and drove off with the woman. Once the situation was resolved, he shifted his focus back to his main task. Controlling the iguana again, he resumed searching for the sunken ship. Hours later, his efforts paid off. There it was, a wreck resting on the seafloor, just as the online information had suggested. He realized his energy sense currently only extended about 20 meters. Not bad, he thought, but I'll need to work on improving it if I want to get better results. As he swam closer to the wreck, his eyes widened at the sight, solid gold bars scattered among the debris. Without wasting time, he called Four Eyes. "Steer the ship toward these coordinates. We've got treasure." "Yes, boss," Four Eyes responded promptly. As the crew prepared for action, Four Eyes turned to Black Ghost. "Hey, can anyone else on the boss's team breathe underwater besides Zhang?" Black Ghost shot him a sharp look. "Stop asking questions. You know better than to pry into the boss's secrets." Once the crew had lowered a recovery basket into the water, he worked quickly, loading the solid gold bars into it. As the last bar was secured, he noticed a piece of unusual metal. Curious, he tested it with his claws, which could normally tear through steel. But they barely left a mark. This alloy is something else, he thought, deciding to take it back for further analysis. Shortly after, Four Eyes reported, "The gold bars are on board and we're heading back, boss." Grabbing the strange metal, he began swimming away when suddenly, out of nowhere, a large white beast lunged at him and bit down. The creature tried to devour him, leading him to think, "Did I just get ambushed by a giant fish? Who does it think it's messing with?" Though the beast was longer and larger, he knew that when it came to strength, offense, and defense, it was no match for him. "Nice try, but I don't even need to break a sweat." A brief struggle ensued, but moments later, he swam away victorious, still clutching the metal in his grasp. Sashimi really does taste better after a fight, he thought with a smirk, wondering if anyone had ever eaten fresh sushi that came with a side of battle. Hours later, he arrived at the shore, reflecting on the reefs he'd passed. The seawater erosion over the years had made them incredibly hard, perfect for testing his strength. Standing before a massive reef, he delivered a punch. He was fully aware that force worked both ways, but his bone density was nearly 20 times that of an average human, and with his external shield absorbing most of the impact, his hand only felt slightly sore. "I can live with a little soreness. My body heals faster than my bank account grows. He punched again, and again. Using the session to train, he mused about his evolution. My physique must be over 200 by now. I'd wager my punches now pack at least 3,000 pounds of force, or 1.5 tons. I could probably punch through a person if I felt like it. With that thought, he delivered a final, powerful blow to the reef, causing it to shatter into pieces. Reefs are tough, but not tough enough. Hours later, he lay exhausted on the sand, satisfaction creeping in as he realized that his punching bag at home definitely wouldn't survive his new strength. He couldn't risk training at the park either. Too many people with cameras these days. One viral video, and next thing I know, the world's calling me the next superhero. The empty beach was the only place he could train freely. He glanced at his hands, noticing how quickly they had healed. Less than a minute had passed since he stopped, and the scrapes were already gone. Now this is what I call a recovery ability. Sitting up, he saw the iguana approaching, proudly carrying the piece of strange metal. Examining it closely, he noticed it had a metallic luster but appeared unremarkable at first glance. When he tried to lift it, however, he struggled, estimating it weighed close to pounds. Great, this thing is heavier than I thought, almost as heavy as a bad decision. Its toughness was undeniable, so much so that even the iguana's claws had trouble scratching it. Perfect material for a weapon, he thought, recognizing its potential. But, with my current crafting skills, this might end up as a very expensive paperweight. For now, he resolved to focus on dealing with the gold bars first. A moment later, he arrived at the ship and asked Black Ghost where the loot was. Black Ghost replied, "It's all on board and cleaned up, boss." He headed to the captain's cabin, where the solid gold bars were stored. Black Ghost, visibly excited, asked, "How much do you think these are worth?" "I've never seen so much gold in my life." Chen calmly responded, "The bars have no markings. They're privately minted, so we can't sell them as antiques." Later, in the bustling downtown area, he entered a shop. The receptionist greeted him warmly, asking, "How can I assist you today?" He asked if they bought gold, and she nodded enthusiastically. "Of course. Are you selling rings or necklaces?" Without a word, he opened his bag to reveal the gold bars, replying, "I want to sell all of it." The receptionist's eyes widened as she stared at the quantity of gold. "Please come upstairs. The manager will want to speak with you." Following her, he met the manager, who introduced himself and asked for his name and the amount of gold he wanted to sell. "I'm Chen," he said simply, gesturing to the bag. "All of it." The manager inspected the contents and informed Chen, "We'll need to verify the gold's quality. Please wait here for a moment." Seated in a nearby chair, Chen watched as the team meticulously examined the gold bars. A short while later, the manager returned, informing him, "The total weight is 11,250 grams. However, because the gold is not very pure and is privately minted, we can only offer you 400 yuan per gram." The manager then asked, "Is that arrangement acceptable?" Chen nodded, accepting the offer. Moments later, he left the shop with 4,500,000 yuan deposited into his account. As he drove away, he reflected on how surreal it felt. People his age were still struggling through college, yet he had made millions from a single adventure. Maybe I should start a class, how to make millions with a giant lizard and some gold bars. Deciding it was time to upgrade his car, he drove to a luxury auto showroom. His current car had a low chassis that performed poorly on the rough coastal roads. Honestly, it was more of a just-getting-by kind of car. At the luxury auto showroom, he was browsing for an upgrade when two people entered, immediately catching his attention. Spotting the woman, his ex, he felt a flicker of recognition. Memories flooded back, the fortune he had spent trying to win her over, only for her to choose wealth and status, mingling with the rich. Ah, the good old days, he thought bitterly. The woman turned to the man beside her and remarked loudly, "That's the loser who used to chase me." The rich man sneered and added, "What's a broke college kid like you doing in a luxury car showroom?" Before Chen could respond, Black Ghost stepped in, his voice seething with irritation. "Who's the rich man calling broke?" Chen, however, raised a hand, signaling Black Ghost to stop. He wasn't interested in dealing with them. The rich man, undeterred, scoffed and said, "Why? We're just telling the truth. Isn't this guy just a broke college student? This place is way out of his league." The woman chimed in, urging the rich man not to waste time on someone like him. Focus on the cars, babe, she said dismissively. Chen just sighed and continued his search. Meanwhile, the woman pointed at a red car and said, "I want that one." The rich man looked at it and nodded. Time to check my bank account, he thought, calculating his finances. With only a few tens of thousands in monthly spending money, he wasn't sure how he was going to afford it. Impressing women? Sure. Buying her a luxury car? Not so sure. Meanwhile, Chen was eyeing a white car. It had a high chassis, plenty of cargo space, and was perfect for his needs. This is the one, he thought. He turned to the salesperson. "I'll take this white car. I'll pay by card." The salesperson smiled and said, "This car is priced at 2.38 million yuan. Will you be paying by card or in full?" Without missing a beat, Chen replied, "I'll pay in full." His ex couldn't believe it. "You're paying by card for a car that costs 2.38 million yuan?" she said, incredulous. The rich boy, pretending to be rich, scoffed and tried to reassure her. "He's faking it. There's no way he has that much money in his account." The woman agreed, recalling how Chen could barely afford instant noodles for weeks back then, just to impress her. Oh, those were the days, she mused. Together they mocked him, suggesting he was just a broke student playing pretend. "Don't bother putting on a show, man," the rich boy added. "It's going to be embarrassing when your card gets declined." Black Ghost, always eager for a fight, stepped up. "What if he can actually afford it? What will you do then?" The rich boy, trying to save face, arrogantly replied, "If he can afford it, I'll call him Dad on the spot. But if he can't, then he's calling me Dad." Black Ghost immediately agreed to the terms with a grin. The woman teasingly suggested, "Let's see if he's bluffing. I doubt he's got that much money." Moments later, the salesperson returned with the car keys and Chen's card. "Congratulations, sir. The car is yours." Chen, with a simple nod, thanked her and walked away. The rich boy and the woman were left speechless, their jaws practically on the floor. Black Ghost turned to them with a satisfied grin. "Well, aren't you going to call him Dad like you promised?" The rich boy, now red with embarrassment, froze. His ex could barely form words. Chen, not bothering to waste any more time, waved a hand. "Let's go, Black Ghost." As they walked away, Black Ghost loudly remarked, "Chen's way too kind. If it were up to me, these two would have to say, 'Dad,' before leaving." Chen's ex stood there, silent, while the rich boy just stared at the ground. As Chen drove away in his new car, he heard a shout behind him. It was his ex, running after him, calling for him to stop and give her a chance to explain. Really? After all that, now she wants to explain? Inside the showroom, the saleswoman whispered to her colleague. She thought she found a rich man, but she ended up missing out on someone with real potential. Her colleague nodded. People often only regret their choices after losing something valuable. Later that night, Chen and Black Ghost arrived at Cloud's Edge, the most prestigious fine dining restaurant in N City. They were greeted warmly by the staff and escorted to a VIP room. As the waitress asked for their order, Chen casually listed a few high-end dishes, including a 5,888 yuan Boston lobster and a 7,888 yuan king crab. "Bring them all," he added nonchalantly. As the meal was served, Chen reflected that while the food was expensive, it was definitely worth it. The flavors were exceptional, and the experience felt just right. Meanwhile, attendants in elegant outfits fed him directly, offering a touch of luxury. He leaned back in his seat, savoring the moment. "After spending so much time cooking meals for my iguana, I think I deserve a little indulgence." As he relaxed, his phone buzzed. He checked the classroom chat group and saw an announcement from his advisor. Reminder: classes begin in a week. All students are expected to report on time. Chen sighed. Classes? That means less free time, time to earn more money. And fast. My iguana needs to break through to the shadow realm after all. Swordfish are among the fastest swimmers in the ocean, capable of reaching speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, about 90 kilometers per hour. But right now his iguana was faster. After devouring a sailfish, he reflected on how delicious it had been. Feeling full, he got back to his treasure hunt. By extending his senses, he could detect objects dozens of kilometers away, but despite scanning the seabed, he hadn't discovered any shipwrecks. Days passed without any luck. As he swam through the deep blue, his thoughts wandered to the oddities of the world. Could there be secret supernatural organizations, perhaps run by the government, pulling the strings behind the scenes? Whatever the case, now that he had extraordinary abilities, he resolved to be more cautious. The next day, he arrived at a sleek office building in N-City. Since Zhang had taken charge of Tianlin Marine Industries, he hadn't set foot inside the place. Observing the bustling area, he noted that Zhang had gone all out. The company looked impressive, clearly a front for something more. But still, the atmosphere was sleek and businesslike. Upon entering the building, the receptionist immediately recognized Black Ghost. With a wave, he called out her name, Ning Nixon. "Gather everyone in the boss's office." Ning Nixon nodded quickly and was off. A short while later, the group assembled in the boss's office. Black Ghost gestured to him, introducing him as the new boss of their company. The employees greeted him warmly, with a few noting how young, handsome, and, of course, wealthy he looked. Ning Nixon, however, thought he seemed exceptionally capable. Black Ghost then introduced Ning Nixon as their receptionist and Su Lengyu as his secretary. Su Lengyu carefully approached, holding his coffee in hand, but he casually waved her off. "Just place it on the table." He scanned the office, impressed by the sleek design. Despite being a shell company, it was surprisingly well equipped. Maintaining it was costing hundreds of thousands a month, which only reinforced his growing need to find more treasure. Calling Black Ghost by his real name, Zhang Shu, he ended the meeting with a flick of his wrist and directed everyone to get back to work. He instructed Shu to head back to the ship and monitor operations. Despite the stable mind control effect for now, he knew subconscious hypnosis wasn't foolproof, so he wanted to keep their interactions with the outside world to a minimum. Later, he stood by the window, sipping his coffee as his constitution points slowly increased. The thought of using clones for treasure hunts while passively growing stronger had him feeling a surge of excitement. Meanwhile, the iguana was busy hunting a barracuda. The fish was 4 or 5 meters long, far larger than the typical 2-meter barracuda. Its speed was blinding, and its steel-like teeth were menacing, but the iguana's strong external force field rendered them useless. As the iguana devoured the barracuda, Chen couldn't help but notice that the meat was different. It was packed with more energy than usual. His system confirmed that the iguana had earned 90 evolution points, and his constitution had increased by 9 points. Something about the barracuda felt off. It wasn't a typical fish. Chen watched as his muscles and bones enhanced, growing exponentially. The increase in his strength seemed almost tenfold. A rare find in the vastness of the ocean. Maybe even one of a kind, he thought with a hint of regret, wishing he could find more. In the office, Ning Nixon asked Su Lengyu, "Do you think our boss has a significant other?" Lengyu raised an eyebrow. "Why? Are you planning to make a move?" Another woman, always quick with the teasing, added, "A little fangirling, Nixon." Their conversation was cut short when Chen unexpectedly entered the room. "Aren't you off work yet?" Lengyu quickly greeted him. "We still have a few tasks left." Chen, of course, had already overheard their conversation. His enhanced hearing had picked up their chatter while he was still in the elevator. Choosing to avoid the awkwardness, he pretended not to have heard. Instead, he flashed a warm smile. "I appreciate your hard work. Dinner's on me tonight." The employees were thrilled. A short while later, they arrived at the Above the Clouds restaurant. Ning Nixon couldn't hide her amazement upon seeing his luxury car, worth over 2 million yuan. At dinner, when the waiter brought the bill, 48,888 yuan, Chen didn't even flinch. "Just swipe my card," he said casually, as if paying for a lavish meal was a routine transaction. Nyaxin felt herself becoming increasingly drawn to him, wondering which wealthy family he might belong to. Ling Yu thought his generosity was off the charts. Regardless, they all agreed that working under such a boss promised a bright future. After the meal, he informed his team that he had something to handle later that evening, but assured them he'd make sure they all got rides back. The employees thanked him warmly for the thoughtful gesture. That night, he found himself on the shore, his fists pounding a massive reef as the sea breeze invigorated him. The soothing air lifted his spirits, and he let himself get lost in the rhythm of his training. By now, his physique had surpassed human limits, being over 20 times stronger than the average person. His punches could exceed 2 tons of force, and with his external force field, that power effectively doubled. bringing it close to 5 tons per strike. However, the stronger he became, the harder it was to control his abilities. He realized he needed to continue training, to refine his mastery over his growing strength. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a boat approaching the shore. Curious about why anyone would visit such a remote area so late at night, he hid near a large stone and observed. The boat docked, and a group of men stepped onto the shore. One man, accompanied by his henchmen, confronted those aboard. He questioned why they still didn't trust him after so many deals together. One of the men on the boat shot back, his voice brimming with tension. Money first, then the goods, as always. That's the rule. Chen realized he was witnessing a D-grade transaction, and the heavily armed group suggested they were dealing in illicit goods. The man on the shore shouted that the items were of top quality, and the leader of the group shook hands with his partner, sealing the deal. As the transaction concluded, the boss warned the man known as Old Chi to be careful, given the tense atmosphere. Old Chi merely reassured him that they only worked through single channels, and that even if something went wrong with the goods, they wouldn't be traceable. Chen observed the exchange from his hiding spot before launching himself into action. Moving with blinding speed, he leapt from a tree and kicked one man square on the nape, knocking him unconscious. In the same fluid motion, he struck Old Chi, taking him out as well. The boss was startled by the sudden attack and swiftly grabbed his gun. Before he could fire, Chen vanished from sight and reappeared right in front of the man, delivering a devastating uppercut that neutralized him instantly. In moments, the entire group was subdued. Chen surveyed the scene, reflecting that these people had abandoned all humanity, contributing to chaos. He felt as though eliminating them had been a public service. Meanwhile, out at sea, Chen controlled his iguana, guiding it toward the boat.
Alright, that's a wrap for today's video. Thanks for sticking around till the end. You're the real MVP. If you're itching for more of this series, drop a comment and let me know. And hey, if you want front row seats to the next part, go ahead and subscribe, tap that bell, and get ready for your notification dance when the next video drops. Catch you next time.